Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session Sourcing in Africa, Catalyzing Sustainable Business Action. My name is Jennifer Baren. I'm the head of partnership at AGRA, and very pleased to be working with our partners today in sharing insights with you, showcasing success, but also talking about the challenges. We're very happy that we are able to coordinate this session together with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. Partnership is definitely the way to go, so we really appreciate that partnership. But before we kick off, may I request you to come a bit more to the front? We have so many empty seats here in front. And you know, when we're taking the final selfie with all the participants, I do want the room to look very interactive and joyful. So may I invite you to just come a bit more to the front? It's also nicer for all the different participants. Asante. So, we have a very interesting and insightful session this morning. And as the title already elaborates, we're going to talk about local sourcing. How can we improve our value chains to actually ensure that we source better, more from our smallholder farmers? Before we kick off, a few interesting statistics. 70% of our food here on the African continent is produced by 33 million smallholder farmers. However, we also have a food import bill on the continent of $40 billion. Ironically, IFAD and AGRA did some calculations and figured out that the investment deficit in our agriculture sector to turn it into a thriving business, the investment deficit is also $40 billion. So somewhere we're not getting the math right. But according to the Africa Development Bank, we do have the opportunity to create a $1 trillion food and agribusiness in Africa. So today we're going to talk about the how. What is it that companies across the value chain can actually do to make that happen? What are some of the corporate procurement practices that we can put in place to ensure that we make our value chains inclusive, meaning sourcing from smallholder farmers, that we also look at sustainability, how can we manage natural resources in an appropriate way, but also responsible. What is it that these key value chain actors can actually do in engaging with their ecosystem and other value chain actors? So without further ado, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Keba Colley, the Global Director of Value Chains at IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, to provide us with a keynote address.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning to all of you. My career started in 2007. I worked for a retail company called Ahold in the Netherlands. I was a young graduate, and I was given the responsibility to develop a whole new work for that company, which meant sustainability and sustainable trade. What it meant for me was to fly around the world in South America, Africa, and Asia to work with emerging suppliers, with current suppliers, and to support those suppliers to comply to the requirements of the company from sustainability and sustainable trade point of view. As a young graduate, that was really exciting for me. At 27 years old, I had the world at my disposal with a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of power. One thing stood out, which was a few countries, suppliers in a few countries, were able to comply to the specifications. It doesn't matter if it's a women-owned, young people, established companies, they're all able to comply much better than the African companies. And the African companies are mainly in Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco. And why? I thought. And those countries were Brazil, Israel, South Africa, partly, and India. Those countries, the suppliers in those countries were able to comply all the time. And even when we were working with emerging suppliers, the smaller ones had everything correct. So I started studying the Brazilian model. Why is Brazil so compliant? From soya beans, beef, fruits and vegetables, could be mangoes, pineapple, apple and pears, watermelon, etc. So when I started looking what Brazil did to be so successful in agriculture, I found out, first of all, in the 50s and the 60s, the government of Brazil at the time, they made an intentional decision, or took an intentional decision, which was to grow agriculture to become one of the best in the world. Intentionally. So mark the word intentional. And what that meant was to develop the infrastructure, basically provision of all kinds of support and services to agriculture, energy, and a lot of knowledge that they have developed through their own capabilities, but also importation of experts and expertise into the country. They developed institutions, and those institutions started studying the country, regions of the country, from crops that can be grown in Brazil, looking at radiation and soil fertility and all other things. They started looking at climate. Basically, they studied what could be grown in Brazil. And so did Israel. One of the founders, I should say, of irrigation, drip irrigation. So in 2012, when I joined IDH, fast forward 2016, I was given the responsibility to develop what we call agriculture value chain transformation. What it meant is for us as IDH, we are a market transformation, and we have investment fund. Basically, my responsibility was to work with the African companies, African SMEs, smaller farmers, to support these companies to grow. What we have come up with now is what we are saying Africa needs. We need our Unilevers, we need our Nestle's, and those are in the African continent. In Tanzania, there's a company called Bakresa. Bakresa is completely dependent on input from their suppliers, the SMEs, the smaller farmers. So what we need to do is to put a lot of support to the SMEs and smaller farmers from a government point of view. For me, this is the key for a transformation of an agriculture sector, just like Brazil and other countries, Israel, India, and part of South Africa did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keba, for that outline. Very interesting to also learn from models from all across the world. What is key? The government support, having local insights into value chains, building the capacity of institutions to map for comparative advantages. I now have the opportunity to introduce you to our panel. Just let me get all the names correct. We will have a panel discussion, and after that you will have the ability to actually ask questions to the panel. So may I invite on stage our panel, Keba, Natasha Santos, who's the Vice President and the Head of Global Stakeholders Affairs and Strategic Partnerships at Bayer. You can give them a hand as they're coming to the stage because they're really going to share a lot of information with you. Sam Ganga, the Upstream and Advisory Manager, Manufacturing, Agribusinesses and Services of IFC for the Africa region. Carol Savreau, Corporate Director, Institutional Business and Sustainability at ETG. And last but not least, Jane Francis, CEO, founder of Something Life from Nigeria. Welcome to the panel. You can have a seat. So fantastic presentation, Keba. Okay. Fantastic presentation, Keba. And perhaps I will start the panel discussion with you. I will give you an opportunity to introduce your institutions and also actually share with us what you are doing in the space of local sourcing, and then we'll go into the question rounds. So Keba, perhaps starting with you at IDH. Building on these insights, you have built a program across the African continent that helps to address some of these challenges and engage with SMEs. Can you just outline for us what some of the challenges are that you've experienced, but also how specifically you have addressed them through your program?
Thank you, Jennifer. I think the challenges we all know, so I'm not going to say much or basically say nothing about it. What I'm going to concentrate on how we're doing it. I think the key is that intention by a government to provide and to be partnering with the private sector in terms of what the sector's value chains and other ancillary services that can be provided to the farmers and so on. So what we are doing as IDH is we are approaching it from a different angle, which is market-led. From a market-led angle means that we cannot start a program or a project without having a buyer, so an institutional buyer. We are creating premium markets, so that could be local in a country or regional or international markets. So that's the first thing. The second one is to work with specific SMEs that have the capability and also the prospect and opportunity to produce the products that are needed in that country, meaning that buyer is looking for. And most of the SMEs, of course, have, if not thousands, but at least hundreds of smaller farmers that they buy from. And those smallholder farmers need to be organized in a way that it becomes a three-party alliance, which is the off-taker, the SME, and the smaller farmers. And in that equation, we have the input suppliers, and that is the first step that we do. The second step is the provision of working capital and seed capital, because we as IDH is also an investment fund. And if we are not able to provide as IDH, we provide through the networks of financial institutions that we work with. And the implementation is done through three modalities. The first one is what we call country value chain development. So basically, where a country has the best possible, the crop is best grown in that country. And the need for government in terms of investment, in terms of what they need, what they have confirmed as food security, and business opportunity for the companies and for the smaller farmers. So that's the first one. The second one is GSA. It's grown in sustainably in Africa, which means that you have take a company like Bakresa in Tanzania, which is processing pretty much everything by themselves. And with that, the products could be grains are grown in Tanzania or across Africa, sourced and processed in their factories, branded, marketed, and sold within the country or within the region. So those are the three areas that we do the implementation in.
Very interesting. And specifically the linkages that you're making to local buyers, but also actors who are exporting. Natasha Santos, I would like to go to you because you're at the other end of the value chain as an input supplier. Would you mind introducing yourself and buyer to us, but also share how, as an input company, you are contributing to building these inclusive value chains and really drive local sourcing as well?
Hi. Thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I slept 3 hours, but was my choice, as Vanessa said this morning. And I did because it's really, thank you for actually bringing Brazil as an example at the beginning, because I'm Brazilian, so completely in love with Africa. So I do that with a lot of passion, and I'm happy to be here because I learn a lot, right? The most important things of those events and this type of gathering is that we meet people and we learn, because we don't know everything, right? Although we have experience of doing a lot of initiatives and amazing people, it's always great as well to see the team here, and a good excuse to learn. So first of all, about Bayer, we have been learning for many years here in the continent. We have a very solid business growth plan, which it's a serious commitment from the company. But as any place of the world, we need to apply local solutions to local challenges, right? And really look at, from our end of the chain, and thinking from the input provider, our customer is the farmer in this continent, particularly the smallholder farmers. So we really need to address and learn what are the smallholder farmers' pain points. So what we have been doing so far, and I think our contribution then to the inclusive value chain and sustainable value chain, is really looking at that piece of the chain, looking at the smallholder farmers, and then thinking, I would say we are obsessed with the topic of how we can close the productivity gap of smallholder farmers in general, and Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular. So looking at that, I think there's 3 areas we all know, but it's easier said than done, right? Because we need partnerships, we need the right policies, and we need the right investment at the right time. So I think there are 3 main areas for us. First of all, which might be more closer to our expertise, is really that access to technology, how we make sure that we create an environment where smallholder farmers can access the technology. Very simple, right? But it's not as simple. We have been learning with partnerships like we have with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with the ATF, the Telemaze project, where we develop hybrid seeds for the local smallholder farmers, and really how we can create that commercialization environment, things like seed system, to make sure that that technology is available and affordable, and the smallholder farmers can use to the best of their productivity gains. The second thing is, well, we are thinking about affordability, and it's not, seeds is for us the heart of it, but there's many other inputs when we think about quality inputs access, that we need to make sure when we think about creating the ecosystem and addressing those pain points of the smallholder farmers. So we have been in collaboration thinking about things like digital marketplaces, where you can make it affordable online, where you can provide more information to farmers. We have collaborations with Rabobank globally and other players as well, and we are looking at that to think about affordable and accessible quality input. So that technology access, I think, is basic. And we need to accelerate, because the technology, the innovation development pace is really fast, and we need to make sure that the smallholders in Africa are not left behind. And that brings maybe to the second point, which is really relevant. We all know, easier said than done, but it's really the capacity building, right? That's a huge enabler and a critical enabler that not only will make smallholders be able to use and to take the best advantage of, as possible, of those quality inputs, but as well increase that agronomic knowledge in terms of practices, agronomic practices, so we can look at profitability, obviously, but as well the sustainable outcomes that we are looking into agriculture production. So capacity building is something that we are very open to innovative thinking as well. We have, as a company, globally 300 initiatives in the food value chain that goes from, for example, how you help in terms of those sustainability outcomes, but in terms of helping to verify practices, for example, which are important for global food companies in terms of some of their commitments or some of their basic quality standards, and local as well. So how we can help enable those practices, but as well help to verify, so the farmer can, let's say, meet those requirements, but then as well how we help farmers to think about that predictable and transparent marketplace. So what is the information in terms of pricing, or information in terms of commodity markets that can help to increase predictability and to increase transparency. And we need partnerships on that, right? We can bring our investment and our knowledge, but we need partners from a public and private sector to really enable that information that can be used to the best of their ability. And maybe the third point, which I think is critical, and we've been thinking a lot, and again, we are open for innovative ideas,
Yeah.
I think is the finance, the access to finance tools, right? How we can, for us, of course, as an input company, how we can have input credit-based or opportunity finance lending. But I think the topic of land fragmentation and how we solve that in a way that benefit the farmers and we help them in terms of, there's a few innovative solutions around this continent, how we can look at that so farmers can be as well competitive in terms of inputs access, but as well market linkages. So that's a big topic that I would like to discuss more as well here as we go through this panel. And then just to finish why this is important for us, and I'll finish,
Yes.
is the last sentence. Of course, I think what we have been doing, as I said, the farmer is our customer, so they need to be successful, so otherwise we are not successful, so it's kind of a basic thing. But as well, I think we are enabling that access to the food value chain. And then last point, we have learned to be able to be resilient to shocks and changes. We have been investing on local production, particularly on seeds, so we have production in 5 different countries. And we are planning expansion here to make sure that at least the basic access to quality inputs, it's something that we can make sure that we are committed and contributing to the food system and the food value chain. Happy to talk more, moderator.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And you really started unpacking a complete ecosystem approach and all of the different challenges. And it's actually very good to see that Bayer, even though you're on the input side of the value chain, that you're so committed to work with others to basically make sure that we strengthen sourcing and first and foremost the productivity of smallholder farmers and their access to technologies. I unpacked at least 9 points from what you've brought forward, but I think in the rest of the interaction we'll come to some of them. Sam, I would like to skip you for the moment, and it's not because of gender balance, but I would like to go to these 2 ladies first, because we've heard from you, Kev, on the ecosystem approach. Natasha, you spoke about input side, and you are all on basically the output side from the farm gate onwards. So I really would like to hear from you, Carol, as ETG, just briefly introduce ETG to us, and perhaps how you're engaging in strengthening local sourcing, just highlighting 1 or 2 activities.
Yes, okay. So ETG is a global player in Africa. We have been present in more than 30 countries in Africa for more than 50 years. We are in all the food, the supply chain, so from the seeds to the food processing, not for all the commodities finally, but sometimes we have cocoa or cashew, and it's for local market, but as well for exports. And after we have got other commodities. So the root of ETG is really the smallholder farmer. That's the priority. And what we do, what we put in place with all the teams in all the countries, we put very upstream, before the planting season, best agricultural practices. We train farmers. We spend time with them, giving orientations, demo plots, other possibilities of revenues. So we do develop more and more agroforestry practices to prepare the future, because, for example, you produce soya, but if the weather is bad or the yield is not good, we never know, because we all know that we are linked with the weather. So we put in place step by step, because smallholder farmers, what do they need is trust, to know. Because we know that in agriculture, finally, innovation, changing mind, take times. And what we do, we say, okay, for the farmer, step by step, by training of about 20 people, is not big groups, with the local chief, we tell them, okay, if you put cashew trees, within 3 years, you will be able to collect, and after to have more revenue. And it's the interest, we do that. And the second orientation we favor, women empowerment. Women empowerment, young people to take over what will be the agriculture of the future. So we do a lot about that. It's just the input without any pun, inputs for fertilizers, but input we put on the ground with everybody and with NGOs as well, because all the partnerships, as Natasha was mentioning, we cannot do without research institution, certification seeds institution, and as well NGOs.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you for introducing a couple of other things as well, the farmer training, but also focusing on gender equality, and also building the capacity of the NGOs that you're working with. So I would like to then go to you, because you're a very interesting panelist as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our WAIA Award winner from 2022. So yes, she deserves a round of applause. WAIA is an award that we provide to women entrepreneurs who are making a difference. So please introduce yourself and also what you're doing in terms of sourcing from our smallholder farmers.
All right. Thank you, everyone. My name is Jane Frances. Thank you, everyone. My name is Jane Frances from Lagos, Nigeria. All right, thanks. So my name is Jane Frances, and I am a founder and CEO of a small food processing company based in Lagos State, Nigeria. We've been in existence for 5 years, and over time, we started with 2 smallholder farmers, which were men, which led me to start asking important questions like, okay, so why don't we have more ladies? Why don't we have, more farmers on board? So currently, we source from about 150 smallholder farmers, and the percentage of, women to men has kind of increased. So out of the 150 smallholder farmers we source from, about 60 of them are women, which is a really very important fact, and we're trying to expand on that. So over time, we've had some challenges, sourcing from them and also trying to expand their output. And the challenges we've seen from working from them was it's not an easy one. However, majority of the challenges were, so we have the input suppliers that are willing to supply seeds, right? But the farmers don't have the trainings. Yes, they can access the seeds, but they don't know how to use them. So that's point number 1. And then secondly, there were issues where, because our farmers operate in clusters, as against, and we don't have access to vast farmland that we can use for mechanized farming. So there are issues where we have partners that are willing to supply equipment, but smallholder farmers, our farms are small. So we've decided over time, and we've agreed that we're going to have a merger. So what we did was put them in a cooperative and try to merge their farmlands and remove the barricades, so that during planting season and we're having tractors to come in, there won't be a barrier, so there is an ease for movement. And also another thing I would like to point out is funding. Funding is really very important. The reason I say this is because most of the financial institutes that want to work with the smallholder farmers, give them funds to plant more, so that way they'll harvest more. But the problem with funding is that most of the financial institutes, when you borrow money, they set up a monthly payment plan, right? And so let's say a farmer plants and it takes about 4 months to get a harvest. So where do you want him or her to get funds to pay the financial institute back monthly? So we've decided that, okay, being here at AGRA, I was going to raise that as a concern. If tailoring the farmer's need, making it an individual, it's not a one-shoe-fits-all kind of thing, So basically, if, let's say, you have a cassava farmer, in another 4 months, okay, he's going to be harvesting, right? So you tailor his payment plan to suit the duration of his harvest. And another important source to note is logistics. We're having a very big issue with logistics. Yes, big companies are expected to come directly to the farmers to source, but then small companies like us, we can't keep going from farm to farm trying to source for things. So we've also tried to set up off-taker station where farmers bring this product to us and then we'll take, but we'd like to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for some of the solutions that you're bringing to your value chain, working with dairy farmers in terms of making sure that you increase their access to markets and opportunities as well. So Sam, I'm coming to you, and we've heard the topic of finance several times, and you work for the IFC. And I don't want to put the weight of the entire financial sector on your shoulders, but I do think that finance is a very critical topic. Can you share with us some of the best practices that as IFC you're bringing to this space as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. So, in introducing myself, I was told the short form of doing this is answering the question, who are you and what do you want? So I am Sam Nganga, I work with IFC. IFC wants to put money to plug this $40 billion financing gap that Jennifer referred to, right? That's what we are about. Now, we've made some progress. Last year we did about $1 billion in investments into agriculture-related investments, but 1 out of 40 is clearly not where we need to be getting to. So the question is, and I really like the way you framed that, right? We have all these instruments, and sometimes they are not well suited for the needs, right? So if the payment schedule is monthly and the cash flows you're getting when the harvest happens, the finance and nature don't line up, right? And so you need to modify. So what are we doing? So a number of areas. One is we recognize that as an institution, we cannot effectively deliver small-scale financing across all these countries. So we need partners. And those partners are either financial institutions or aggregators or various other partners that we are working with. And then the second thing we need to take into account is that every country is different. And I really like the framing from the keynote about being intentional, right? So we've done financing support to 70,000 farmers in Ethiopia with a couple of partners in the barley value chain. That required us to tailor the financing on offer because, there were some constraints around local currency and accessibility of dollars. Our typical investment is dollar finance, right? And so we had to go and localize that into an instrument that was appropriate for Ethiopia, and in that way we were able to provide financing. But we are not able to lend directly to a farmer, right? So we do need some partners to work with us. And so one of the things I want when I came to this event was to also find partners that we can work with in terms of financing opportunities. The team that I run at IFC is called Upstream, and Upstream in every institution means something different. So let me tell you what Upstream means to us. Is earlier in the day, I sat in this room and there was people presenting and saying they need $350,000, right? They're probably a bit too small for us to be able to effectively partner with, but they will be big in a couple of years. And so our team, what we do is we work with the smaller businesses which are trying to get to a scale that they can access significant funding, and we help them get there. And what they need to get there, again, varies by company, but there is a lot of intentional project development and working with them to find an opportunity to put funding into agribusiness. So the topic of agriculture is big, Africa is big, financing is big, but I think if we all work together and we get into partnerships, we might be able to find solutions. We're willing and able to help. And let me just conclude by saying this is my 3rd day in Tanzania. I've just relocated here, so I don't actually know what I'm talking about yet when it comes to Tanzania, but to sort of say for anybody who's doing agriculture in Tanzania, we would really like to talk to you about financing. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. So ladies and gentlemen, Sam has business cards available post the session. You can approach him and his team to understand how you can better partner and how you can also build these mechanisms in Tanzania. Thank you for that contribution. I would now like to go to a different topic that is actually quite parallel to what we're discussing. As we speak, the Climate Action Week just closed in Nairobi, or is maybe still ongoing with post-event meetings. And sustainability and ensuring that we manage our natural resources appropriately is very critical. I would like to specifically direct this to Carol and Natasha in terms of how you're actually helping to create win-win situations for farmers. As a business working with them in ensuring that both green practices are introduced, but also making sure that we have the productivity gains that we actually need to have. Perhaps you can start first.
All right. Yeah. So what we have learned through the years is that the best way, and learn from farmers and collaborating with farmers, is that the best way to look at sustainability, which is a challenge for all of us, all society, but particularly for farmers, because they need to live with the mitigation and adaptation pressure that they have, is that we really need to look collectively at the outcomes that we want to incentivize, or that we want to make sure that we help to transform. Right? There's a lot of discussions around, well, how we can change farmers' behavior, or how we can make farmers change this and that. Well, farmers will change or will, do whatever it makes them profitable and make their farming sustainable. So looking at the climate pressure, what we have been discussing with partners is what are the outcome, partners including governments, right? This might be slightly different if you look at this continent, or if you look at the northern hemisphere, but what are the outcomes that collectively we want to foster with the farmers and we want to incentivize, right? In the context of the buzzword regenerative agriculture that we adapted to our own strategy, and looking at how we look at research and innovation, we believe there's some 5 key areas of outcomes that we want to support farmers to enable. So number 1 is the social and economic point, because as mentioned, first of all, it's a business, right? We all know farming, and they need to be successful and profitable. And I mentioned on my first intervention some of the actions that we are doing, not only in terms of access to technology, but capacity building, and making sure that they can farm in a profitable way. So that's number 1, and that will impact their livelihoods, and then that successful chain will be ignited, right? I visit Kenya recently, 1 minute, okay? Visit Kenya recently, and one of the things that we are really committed to are our initiatives on, for example, village-based advisor, the train the trainer, where you really transform that community because you create those trainers from a farmer, from the local community, and then they can offer and add value to their business. The second piece is really looking at the climate point of view. So can we reduce emissions? Can we sequester carbon? Can we make sure that we are looking at soil health from an outcome point of view, and that will contribute to productivity as well. And then the biodiversity piece, the water management in terms of optimize inputs use, but then those water reduction being incentivized in terms of, can be subsidized, can be value chain incentives as well, because we all know there's a lot of the scope 3 and sustainability targets downstream. So how can we make sure that's verifiable and incentivize it, and it makes sure that it's part of an economy, a whole economy rationale. So from our side, we are working on capacity building, we are working on investing on drought tolerance, on quality inputs in seeds and quality inputs in general. We are looking at partners where we can think about incentive mechanisms that will enable farmers, but more importantly, making sure that we can help farmers with the adaptation and mitigation needs, and we can incentivize sustainability outcomes regardless of the farming practice, because the farmers know how to farm best if they have the tools and the knowledge. So let leaves to them and incentivize the outcome.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer, Carol.
So thank you, Natasha. I'm going to complete with, because it's similar, I'm not going to repeat what you said. It was very interesting, and we put in place as well on our side. On pragmatic example, what we do as well to convince farmers for agroforestry, sustainable actions and everything, we use radio dissemination a lot. We do work as well with GIZ. GIZ on the ground, they do have training modules, and we complete what on both sides what can be done with the farmers. We do a lot with cooperatives as well, farmer association, because we must mention their work. We work as well with women associations. Because women always, there is always an excuse not to be on the training module. They say, yes, we are busy, we cannot, etc. So we try to alleviate their burden, saying, yes, there is a possibility for them to bring along their kids. And as well, when they have got the crop done and to be paid, we paid to the woman directly by the mobile. So it's, you know, we do all these things. I think, Bayer, you must incentivize in different ways or even on the same. But we do our best to securize and to give trust. Because with trust, we can move along.
Great, thank you. So we almost see like mirrors at both ends of the value chain in terms of how you're trying to build capacity and reach out to farmers. Now I have a very interesting question because the word partnerships, working together, collaborating, and some of you even named the key partners you're working with, really resonated throughout. But are any of you aware of partnerships amongst each other, or is this something we can facilitate as we are on stage? Okay, fantastic. Okay, good. Because I think that's actually also critical and why also many of the actors are coming to the agribusiness deal room. How can we create synergies and work better together? So Jane Frances, I would like to come to you. Before going to you in the audience with questions, I really want to drill down on this partnership so you have a clear idea what some of these actors here on stage or speakers are looking for when it comes to partnerships. You also mentioned the importance of partnerships. So can you maybe explain to us also what needs to improve in the ecosystem? Who needs to step up? Who would you ideally like to partner with better? So the question would be for both you, Jane, and Keb, I would also like to come to you before going to the audience.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So the people would like to see step up first. The input suppliers. Yes, please. The input suppliers. So basically, yes, we are aware that, you know, they have seeds, they have improved seeds. Are there instructions on how to use them? I mean, would you want to, what's the whole idea of the improved seeds is to give it to the farmers to be able to yield a better harvest. But if they're still using the same old processes, is it going to yield a better result? So capacity building for our farmers alongside the improved seedlings, right? Secondly, the financial institutes also needs to step up. Like I mentioned earlier, you can't give a loan to a farmer and put him on a monthly payment plan when his harvest is due in another 4-6 months, right? And thirdly, we need equipment. We need a more mechanized agricultural system whereby, you know, it appeals to the younger generation and, you know, it could also transcend. We're looking at transition here. So if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and then we're expecting results, that's not going to happen. So we need equipment, and our farmers already indicated interest to work as a cooperative and merge their farmland. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Jane. On behalf of Natasha, I think Bayer will be reaching out to you for a new partnership in terms of seed access, but you can also respond to that, Natasha. But I think from an IFC perspective, I see great opportunities to maybe create more awareness with the financial institutions that are relevant to your operating environment. And Keba, there must be an opportunity to create partnerships with machinery companies. But perhaps I give you an opportunity first to describe what you are looking for in the ecosystem with regards to new partners.
Okay, I'm going to follow you. I like looking at the audience when I speak. I was looking at you all the time. So I think the whole thing is all about a food systems approach. I should say food systems transformation approach, which basically means IDH has recently launched South African Food System Transformation Alliance, which we've got the major companies in South Africa. So not retailers, but food manufacturing companies and SMEs and smaller farmers plus financial institutions to sign a covenant for the companies in South Africa to use $2 billion, which is used today to import, to invest it in the country locally, and then regionally in Southern Africa and then Africa. By 2033, 80% of what is sourced and processed in the factories must be coming from local sources. So this is an agreement that we've signed. That's the main way we believe in terms of partnership. What it basically means, if we're looking at a country which is looking to develop a certain agriculture sector because they have commercial competitive advantage on it, it has to be done in a way where, again, the intention from a government point of view, so it's not, I'm going to put this investment so I can win next election, but you're actually investing for 10 years, 20 years, because agriculture, we tend to look very nicely in terms, for many of us who are in donor community, we tend to look at 2 years or even 1 year, and then we start counting farmers. So that's not what we're looking at. What the whole thing is about is 10, 20 years, which basically means that in this case, you have the government, you have private sector companies, then you have financial institutions, you have input suppliers in a country, which then intention is, what is our problem in our country? What do we want to solve? To identify that as a country, to identify the needs, the opportunities, and then from that angle start prioritizing. So what do we start with? And with that comes then the roles and responsibilities of each party in that.
So basically an alliance of partners who are aligned on a vision to create food security or sovereignty in a country.
We have to learn from the countries we know. I spent all my 16-year career in the Netherlands and born and raised in Sweden. I know how European countries have transformed the agriculture sector. Rabobank is born out of a cooperative. So that's one example.
Yeah, thank you.
Of partnership.
Thank you so much. I would, now that we actually have a bit of a vision of what partnerships and solutions we're looking for, I would like to turn to the audience. Do we have any questions for our panelists? There should be a mic roaming. If you have a question, please raise your hand. State your name and institution and your question. Try to keep it brief and short, and also indicate who your question is destined for. I see no hands. Was it that clear? Oh, I see one gentleman here. Oh, and also a lady there. And a third question here. So we'll take 3 questions first. Here, the gentleman. Okay. You go ahead and then we'll come to you. Yes, thank you.
Ladies first. He's very gallant. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mildred Peter. I work for Bayer. So my question obviously will go to IFC. Yes, I think the question about access to finance keeps coming on and on and on, and I just keep wondering how innovative that perhaps we start to rethink that, because institutions sometimes will go to commercial banks, which, you know, that's the standard way of doing things. The criteria is still very inaccessible to smallholder farmers. So I would like to hear from the IFC's point of view, what is then this innovation that you're thinking about? Because when we hear $300,000 is too small, sometimes then where do we leave the smallholder farmers? So these financial instruments keep being available for the bigger growers or bigger players within the value chain. How do we then cascade and find solutions that can facilitate access, perhaps seasonal access to finance? Because the present financial instruments obviously are not working. If we have a 90-day cycle, you know, for grower, when do they start paying? You know, can we think innovatively? And I think as a company, we can be open to have this conversation with you. We already have some partnerships with IFC, but let's see how we can perhaps, I'm gone past piloting, I think. Yeah. We can do very concrete things innovatively to really open opportunities for smallholder farmers.
Yes, thank you for your question. I suggest we take the next question. So Sam, you have one question, that gentleman there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel, and I am a proud rice farmer from Ifakara. Thank you. My issue is on productivity side of the agriculture. So we obviously know that there is market availability outside in the world, but the problem is productivity to most of the smallholder farmers, and innovative ways to continue, like continuously innovate on their productivity. So, and this question goes to Natasha and sorry,
Carol?
Carol.
Yes.
Yes. So how do you ensure like the finance side of your business? How do you guys ensure that the activities that the farmers that come to you with these requests are being like they're done, and how do you scale that from, let's say, 2022 to 2023, there is actual growth of productivity? So how do you help us with that?
Yes, thank you for your question. I think that's very clear. I know there was a third question there. I'm not sure whether you already have a microphone. And what I suggest is perhaps we address these two questions first before going to the third, if you wouldn't mind giving the lady here, I think, had a question. So Sam, I think we go to you first in terms of the innovative financing question.
So did you say Baramuso was your organization? What was your organization?
It was Bayer who had a question on innovative finance, so
Got
that's
it.
almost like an in-crowd, and then this gentleman, the rice farmer, had a question.
So and it's really good to meet somebody who's actually farming, right? Because we can have this conversation in the abstract. So I'll be very brief. Your question was, what are the innovations in financing? And I think there's two parts to this. One is we can innovate in the tools that we provide. So for example, in the same way that we have to aggregate when we collect along the value chain, because you need a certain scale in order to be able to function, we should also be able to aggregate financing needs, perhaps by having a fund that then on-lends to smallholder farmers directly, and so the economics of the funding actually work. So that's something we've looked at, and we're looking at, I don't know whether my colleague Elvira is in the room, we're also looking at mechanisms for identifying a large number of different organizations that need financing and then aggregating that need into one collective thing. We also have areas where we don't actually need to innovate conceptually, it's just the tools we need, which is farmers don't want to borrow dollars because they're exposed to forex risk. So we are looking at options as to how do we do local currency financing. Let me say one last thing about financing, which is, and you will forgive me, as a financing institution, both ourselves and also other financing institutions, including your local bank, they do this as a business. So you can only be financed if you have a viable business that is actually going to work. So I don't think that's a negotiable point. If you do set up your business well, then the rest of the things will follow. And I think part of the challenges we have is sometimes what we need are grants, right? And if that is the case, then we should say that, and then we deal with how to finance grants. But if we're doing this as a business, then we really need to make sure that the business model is well set up. Let me stop there.
Thank you for that answer. And Carol, may I maybe invite you to address the question also from the gentleman in terms of how you assist them with the smallholder farmers in terms of accessing finance? Finance or productivity? Sorry, productivity. Thank you. Yeah.
And it's important to have finance. Finance is finance. I respect my colleague. Okay. About growth and productivity, yes, it's always a challenge every year. But what we try to put in place is the intercropping, to explain them. So we get back to the training sessions and everything, because finally you are right. Intercropping permits them to understand how we can valorize the soil, which is very important. And what is going to be the future, and we see more and more that in international press and above all in Africa, is the carbon credit. So more and more farmers say, okay, I can valorize as well my soil with agroforestry practices, and I get back to finance as well, because carbon credits, finance, all that is in motion. And I think next year, Vanessa, we will have a session, special session, I think, about carbon credit, because that's the key words. And that will be next revenue for agriculture, for smallholder farmers in the future. So productivity for me is as well linked with that. Sorry, I shortened my sentence because it can be more, but I will be pleased to talk with you after. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Natasha, do you briefly want to respond to
Yes,
that as
I will
well?
maybe super quick. So first of all, you can hear me, right? First of all, I think definitely from quality inputs obviously is the first piece and is our core business. Second, we have been trying in many different markets different ways of go-to-market where we can attach agronomic advice on it, right? Through partnership. IFC and others are partners with us. So if we think about the village-based advisor approach that we have in Kenya, can we train the trainers? So because we need to attach the inputs to agronomic advice, right? So we can really work with the farmers through the cycle. I think one of the main challenges of smallholder farmers, we all know, is that they cannot apply the economy of scale, and you cannot just hold so you can sell on the best price on the market. So I think that challenge in terms of aggregation and in terms of how we make the market linkage more competitive is something that we have been trying, because we really are trying some end-to-end approach to support farmers as well in terms of how they sell the produce. But this has to be through partnership. So I think the base, maybe to shorten the answer, is really how we attach the agronomic advice into the inputs and the commercialization cycle, and then as well how we address that, the challenge of not being able to use economy of scale, and how we creatively address the challenge of fragmentation with the farmers. And it will depend on the cropping, will depend which rotation you use as well, and looking at that as a whole, as a system, is where we think we can really partner with our farmers' customers.
Thank you so much for that answer, Natasha. Integration of knowledge into the services that you provide to farmers. I have time for one question, if it's very condensed. Everybody else, the lady already has the mic, gentlemen, I'm sorry. If it's very condensed, and if you can indicate who that is for, I would invite everybody to just approach the speakers post-summit, because I know this very interesting and rich discussion.
Okay. Hello, I'm Dr. Nur Abdul Malik. I'm from Imperial Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security in Nigeria. And I hope you'll forgive me for overflowing the finance issue, but it's a germane bit to our thematic area. And my question is that in Nigeria, for instance, we're trying to attain self-sufficiency in rice production. And for us to do that, we need to diversify the production calendar from wet season to dry season, which means we need to do 2 cropping seasons. That is irrigated agriculture. And most of our farmers are smallholder farmers. About 70% of them are smallholder farmers. So, and due to the issue of the energy supply, especially with the removal of fuel subsidy in Nigeria, so the cost of production for farmers is very high.
And the question is, sir?
The question is, we need investment in areas of solar power pumping machines, and also in terms of dryers and dehydrators, to enable the farmers reduce post-harvest losses.
Yes.
So if you can help us to identify investors that can drive investment and reduce the cost for this equipment, I think we'll like it.
Thank you so
we
much.
Have a very
for your
large
question.
market for that.
Thank you so much for your question. I advise that when we close this event, that you speak to Sam about how actually IFC might be able to support in your area. Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's a very interesting discussion, but I really would like to close our panel discussion and just go back to the panel. One question, under 30 seconds. Next year, we're back at the AGRF in Kigali, Rwanda. I expect all of you to be there, including our panel. What will be the key message you're coming to Kigali with? Under 30 seconds, otherwise it passes to Natasha.
Okay, we will have 3 clusters established in East Africa, Southern Africa, and West Africa, and all of them in a minimum 3 countries in each cluster. and we have investment of about 50 to 60 million US dollars in total for commercialization and industrialization
Impressive. Looking forward to it.
for Africa and beyond.
Looking forward to it, Natasha.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, panelists. This was really exciting. So for us, I would say, I mentioned at the beginning, we have a solid investment plan for this continent, so we need to make it work to 2030. So for that, we're really open to innovative ideas in terms of partnership and how we can bring the best quality and services to farmers. We are very much committed to improve and to develop a strong seed system in this continent, because we need that as foundation for agriculture, and that will only be able through partnership, and we need to develop small and medium enterprise to make that happen, and local companies to make that happen, and we will be a partner in that journey. So thank you very much. That's my 30 seconds.
Thank you, Natasha. Sam, your first year in Tanzania, what would you have
so
delivered?
first, by the time we go to Kigali, we should be showcasing investments we have done in Tanzania, so that's my hope, right? So please help me, and we will continue to partner with all the people on stage to work directly with farmers to help them do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Carol?
Okay, since Kigali, what we did, we have just put in place, we are starting a big program in Malawi and in Zambia with smallholder farmers, how to improve soybean supply chain. We are going to target 90,000 farmers, and we are going to work with NGOs in Malawi, and we are going to work as well in Zambia, Eastern Province. And the last thing we put in place at the moment is another way, but it's important, is the job creation. That's growth. In Rwanda, we are going to reuse the waste of our edible oil in not very far away from Kigali, and is thanks to Kigali last year, I said, okay, we must change our mind. Instead of recruiting in the normal way, we are going to recruit for this soap plant reuse of edible oil. We are going to recruit 80 women impacted from genocide. Okay. And we are going to recruit young people. We put in place training modules, and we will promote our soap, organic soap made in Rwanda. So is what we put in place now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane Francis.
All right, so first, we would like to see more access to improved seeds, and then trainings and capacity building that goes along with it. Secondly, easy access to financing for our farmers. And then thirdly, we'd like to see a lot more modern version of farming in order to make it more attractive to the young generation to come on board. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Can I have a big round of applause for our panel? And do not leave us yet, because we have closing remarks from a very special lady. It's Vanessa Adams, the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and the COP at AGRA, and her closing remarks are very critical. Why? Because this is the lady who makes the partnership happen and connects all the dots. Vanessa.
Says Queen of Partnerships, right? I take that in high esteem. I'm standing over here because really this is a wonderful room of dedicated people. I see Schengen Fan sitting in the back. We can't do anything without the data and analytics, right? Which make us honest and stay true. We lost a couple people through this session, but who are fearless leaders in this space and really dedicated and committed. But I wanted to reiterate that I was just before this in the youth session, and they all asked, please reach out to us, make space for us. Let's find how we can connect throughout these supply chains also with the youth, because we know that in the food and ag space, it's hard to make money, whatever age you are. It's hard to find money to make your investments work. Innovation exists, but scaling is very challenging. And so each of you are here because you've been through that scaling process, whether it's been in terms of establishing networks, supply chains. We talked a little bit, but not too much, about the digitization and traceability and food safety standards. And we know that it's not enough to be generalists. We all want to get more specific and more expert and a lot more diligent, driving into the necessary. You talked about the soy supply chain, for example. This one we know can transform the continent. If we can bring the cost of soy production down and the productivity up, we'll actually improve all of our access to nutritious meats and more sustainable supply chains. So we can pick a few of these battles that we can win together. I really like Jennifer's push on deliverables. Everybody in here is action-oriented. And we know how hard it is to sit through a week of meetings because we want to be out in the field making it happen. So let's make it happen while we're here. If you haven't met the people sitting next to you, in front of you, behind you, take 5 minutes to reach out to someone you've never seen or talked to before. Who knows? That might be tomorrow's business partner. That's why you came here for. So definitely the return on investment is reaching out to someone that you haven't spoken to, learning something new, as was mentioned before, and taking that chance. The last point, again, we at AGRA are 100% committed to seeing our farmers improve their livelihoods, but we know also that business and sustainability model is not only an idea, right? It's a day-to-day practice. It's really about recovering from crises and forecasting and bringing all that technology which exists in boardrooms, in Brazil, in Vietnam, in France, all the way back to the farms here in Tanzania. And so I hope that we'll all keep each other accountable and deliver more together. So let's get back to business. Thank you all so much.
Let's get back to business. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence. May I invite our speakers for a photo opportunity.